and then somehow enforce that with no one owning it because the studios have shut down.
It's a massive burden to register a copyright.
The company has to go and control it. Well, what if the company's not around anymore? Is that just...
If the company's not around anymore, then who the cares? What, like, imagine the problem we're thinking. What if somebody wanted to host a global Pong server now, and they hosted the Pong server, and now they want to charge people money to join it, and now the original company, well, then who the cares? Then let them charge money to host the server. Who cares? Who's even being harmed at this point? Oh, the Pirate Software stuff is hot right now? I don't think it is hot right now. I was just curious about the older stuff. But I feel like I must have gone over that video before, right? Find me the very first stop killing games response from Thor. Go. Is it this one?
Hi. My name is Jason, also known as Pirate Software Online. I've been in the gaming industry for about 20 years. I used to work at Blizzard Entertainment, then Amazon Game Studios, and now I own my own studio, Pirate Software, by the same name, which is an indie studio, and I've been here for about 8 years now. I also run a massive community. We've got about 180,000 people in Discord, and most of what I do is try to teach other people how to make games, teach them that they can make games, show them the tools to do so, and try to do everything without any paywalls or bullshit in the way. It's incredibly important to me that we keep making games and that the next generation has the tools to do so their medium doesn't die out, and it never will. And that's the whole intention of all of this. So with that in mind, that community brought me this and tried to get me to sign it. And I don't want to. Number one, I can't because I don't live in Europe. But number two, I wouldn't sign it even if I could. And I'm going to kind of go through this and try to explain the reasoning as to why that would be the case. Okay. Without all of the internet hate machine that's grown up around it. So let's go into how this works and why this is an issue to me. First things first, what is an initiative? So an initiative is actually not law. It is something that you put together so you can put it up in front of representatives and they can start the conversation. The reason why I have a problem with Stop Killing Games is specifically it starts the wrong conversation. If we're trying to kill off the practice of developers putting together a live service game, pitching it as a single player experience, and then taking away support in the future, this ain't it. And the reason why is specifically on this initiative, under its own description, it says, this initiative calls to require publishers that sell or license video games to consumers in the European Union or related features and assets sold for video games they operate to leave said video games in a functional playable state. Specifically, the initiative seeks to prevent the remote disabling of video games by the publishers before providing reasonable means to continue functioning of said video games without the involvement from the side of the publisher. This isn't always possible.
This is 10 months old, by the way, so I know this is an old video, but I'm just catching up on this.
In all video games, and it doesn't call out the specific practice that this is supposedly trying to defeat. It is incredibly vague and will damage all live service games. How would you keep League of Legends in a
Okay, sorry, hold on.
Is supposedly trying to defeat. It is incredibly vague and will damage all live service games.
So, of course it's vague. He said it himself. This isn't legislation. This is an initiative to start a conversation. So it's going to be relatively vague here. We're not actually writing out a law yet, of course, right?
How would you keep League of Legends in a functional playable state? You'd have to re-architect the entire game. The game is what is called client-server. So in client-server models, there's a server and there's a client, and all of the math, all of the game, everything happens on the server. The client just displays it. And the reason we want to do it that way is so that you can't teleport around and do a billion damage. You don't.
Okay, so I'm not a game developer, and I don't know if he's being a level of specificity. So this is what I was kind of talking about before. I don't want to overstep. I don't think anything he just said there is like correct, really, though. So like, for instance, when he says it's a client-server game, just because you have a game that has a server doesn't necessarily mean the server is doing all of the calculations. I don't even know if client-server game refers to a particular type of architecture or structure of a thing. Like you can have what he's referring to specifically with League of Legends is when you're playing a multiplayer game with other people, the server itself is actually handling a lot of the calculations to make sure that on the client, some of the information isn't available to be read through in the RAM in order to cheat, like for instance, seeing people in the fog of war. So for instance, in a lot of games, so like for StarCraft, and I imagine for probably most games, all of the information, if you're wondering, how can you do wall hacks in CSGO? How can you do wall hacks in a video game? Well, the reason is that your client has all of the information about where everybody is. However, it just obfuscates from you don't see them because they're hidden behind walls, so they don't render the characters. But if you have a hack of some sort, you can dive through the RAM, or you can dive through whatever bullshit in the game itself, and then you can find, oh, there they are, and then you can use a hack to show it to you. For League specifically, League does a lot of these things server side, so it's not even possible to hack it on the client. But I don't know why he brings this up. Like there are plenty of games that have clients and servers that don't do the math necessarily this way. And there are also, just because it's done that way doesn't mean that you couldn't make it so that a person could host their own server and still have the exact same setup. So I don't know why he brings this up at all. I don't know why. Like if I had server files and I could host a server on my computer, I could have 4 friends join it. We could play a 5v5 bot game on, like I could just be running the server. So I don't know why he would bring this up, but okay.
Don't trust the client. You trust the server. The client just displays what it's told, right? So if we wanted to re-architect this, we'd have to take all of that server logic, push it back out into the client, and somehow make that playable in a...
Like, that's just not true.
A multiplayer-only video game. That doesn't...
Like, the clients themselves, I'm making assumptions here, but I'm certainly correct. The clients themselves can already do all of the calculations. The only stuff that's being obfuscated are other players' characters, right? You can see this yourself. If you lose connection, I'm trying to think there is no true single player league. I'm confident that if you queue a minion, it can calculate like the damage and do crits and go to the shop and all of that. You don't need the server to do those calculations for you. Pretty sure it's just displaying information about where other characters are, other player characters are on the screen and stuff related to them. But again, even if that was the case that you couldn't, which it's not, but even if that was the case you couldn't, you can just make the server files available to individuals and they could just host themselves. So I don't know why he's saying this would be, you wouldn't have to push all of the math and redo everything. That's just dumb. Yeah.
Like this, we have to take all of that server logic, push it back out into the client, and somehow make that playable in a multiplayer-only video game. That doesn't make sense to me. So this isn't going to work for all games. Why is it calling out all games? And it's really easy to say like, oh, that'll get worked out down the line. But we're dealing with...
If you have two clients, who decides who's right? I think this is where the concept of like netcode comes in and how you reconcile these things. But in League of Legends, the decider is the server. The server itself is what does calculations, and the server itself will obfuscate from the clients themselves when it comes to displaying like player models and stuff. But
government here. If we're going to be putting up these types of ideas specifically in front of government, we need to be calling out the right issues, especially if you don't have precedent set. Because now you're going to be setting precedent on something that doesn't make any sense.
Or you could have in some games to do matchmaking. I don't think this is common anymore though, but like in old games, wasn't this true for like Xbox, like COD, Modern Warfare 2 and stuff? You would have, there's a name for this, like self-hosting or something, where when you join a game, like you host the game yourself and then other people join and shit. What is it called? Is it just called peer-to-peer maybe, where the client itself becomes the host per game, just it picks one? So
we need to be calling out the right issues, especially if you don't have precedent set. Because now you're going to be setting precedent on something that doesn't make any sense with people that may not understand the nuance of our industry, all in the name of saving games. I can't agree with that. So let's go into why this is happening, right? So why did this start in the first place?
This is completely false. You would have to redo everything on the back end to move between peer-to-peer, server authoritative, distributed, etc. at Destiny. Explain to me why you couldn't just have somebody host League of Legends server executable on their computer and then connect to that with their own league client and other people to their own league client. What do you mean? Destiny, servers are more complicated than just a single binary. There's a whole web of services that make up a game server, and often those services are coupled. I think people base their expectations on games that let you self-host servers because they are designed for that. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I think it would be arbitrarily easy to bundle these and to make these accessible to player. In 2025, I seriously doubt that in order to host stuff, you have senior engineers that are wading through in difficult code, trying to weave together some server architecture to host it. I guarantee you all of this shit is set up in such a way that probably some retard can come in and push a button for a host server and it generally works, is going to be my guess in this day and age.
What is the specific cases they've called out that are egregious? And they have one. It's The Crew. So action on The Crew. The video game The Crew, published by Ubisoft, was recently destroyed for all players and had a player base of at least 12 million people. Due to the game's size and France's strong consumer protection laws, this represents one of the best opportunities to hold a publisher accountable for this action.
The only thing I can think of is that if the company releases a binary, someone could reverse engineer it. Okay, but you can already you can reverse engineer anything if you want. I mean, I guess maybe having a binary might make it a little easier, but who cares? NSA has a free decompiler, so you don't have to spend a lot of money of a program. This is really hard to actually parse everything out, but it is possible. A decompiler is not going to give you like readable source code. It's not like you can push decompile and now, oh, it's in C. I understand everything. Like you can decompile shit for a modern program. I'm pretty sure it's going to be a jumble. You'd have a better chance probably trying to sort through an LLM's code than getting anything like usable or meaningful from it would be my guess.
If we're successful in charges being pressed against Ubisoft, this can have a ripple effect on the video games industry to prevent publishers from destroying more games. First off, I don't like the idea in this that it has a player base of 12 million people. That is not how long-running games work. There is a large number of people that buy the game, and that player base slowly dwindles off until nobody is playing anymore. If there's any cost associated with keeping the game online, which this was an online video game, then eventually it costs more to keep it online than it does to keep running it, right? So the cost outweighs the amount of income for it. There are bad business practices that can occur in there. There are companies that will sell a online-only game as a single-player experience and kind of just put it into the TOS and hide it. But not all companies do that. When they do, we should be calling out that specific company, not all companies. So let's take a look at this and find out more about The Crew.
The problem is not to bundle them, but that the server depends on a lot of third-party services that you can't just bundle into a single binary. Instead, you'd have to manually set up some AWS stuff, for example. Like, I'm just going to go with my gut on this. I'm sorry. And that most people that work in programming are retarded. I don't believe you. I think it would be arbitrarily easy to create some pre-existing image or some pre-packaged thing that a retard could literally double click and open, and it would automatically configure itself. And maybe if you want to host, maybe it would come with a list of things where it's like, make sure that you have a server that can handle these types of connections, like, that can have like this minimum bandwidth or whatever. I know this would be possible. Without knowing anything about this, I know it would be possible. Okay. I know it would be possible. Fuck you.
Crew itself. If we pull up their Wikipedia, we can see that the crew was actually created in 2014, which, much to the hatred of all of us oldies on the internet, was 10 years ago.
Wow.
Oh. So this was an online-only racing video game developed by Ubisoft Ivory Tower and Ubisoft Reflections and published by Ubi.
Can you take a big step back and explain what the mission of the Stop Killing Games was? I was too lazy to read it. Actually, no, it wasn't. Dan was. But my guess is basically, from the little bit that we did read, is sometimes there are single-player games that require online authentication to play. So when the online servers go down, you can't play them anymore. And then also there are multiplayer games, or you buy it basically for the multiplayer. And then when the online servers go down, you can't enjoy the multiplayer anymore. And there's no like LAN functionality or anything. And I think Stop Killing Games was just trying to make it so that, well, if you release a single-player game, at the very least, it can't have an online authentication required, because that's bullshit. Because when the servers go down, you can't play your single player game anymore. And then maybe some way to allow people to host multiplayer games still. I don't know if that was a part of their mission, but
Ubisoft. So all Ubisoft, right? With that in mind, it said it was a scaled-down recreation of the contiguous United States and included both role-playing and large-scale multiplayer elements. So it had a massive multiplayer component to it. It is an online-only service-based game, and they shut it down 10 years later. On March 31st, 2024, Ubisoft shut down the game's servers, rendering the game unplayable, which is normal for live service games. The only thing that I could see in here that could be
decompilers, IDA, or Ghidra would decompile the code down to assembly, and it would still be jumbled. You would be able to see that there were calls being made, but you would have to infer a lot of it. To try to say that you would have to infer a lot from getting assembly from a modern program, I think is the equivalent to me giving you a piece of DNA under an electron microscope and then me asking you to tell me what the human would look like based on what you see under the microscope. I could be wrong, but I don't believe that you could decompile a modern program that's going to be billions and trillions or whatever of zeros and ones in assembly language and be like, oh, I see how they were using the functions here. Oh, I see how they had this. I don't think it would be meaningful. I don't believe it would be meaningful. That's my understanding. Okay. No, the program reads the binary and then it prints out C code. You obviously have to do some work to understand the parts of it, but it's not going to, I mean, not even that, like nothing would be commented, like all of your functions, nothing is going to be named in any coherent manner. It's going to be like, it's going to be, it's going to be a jarbled cluster of anything. It might as well be assembly at that point, no? Like, it's not like any of the stuff is going to be readable. I guess even if it does put it out in some kind of language, it's not going to be decipherable.
Problem is if they post it as not an online-only experience. But everything that I found online shows that the game was always marketed as online-only. If you're going to be buying an online-only game, that means it can only run when it's online. And if the servers need to shut down in the future, far in the future, it makes sense to me for the access to that game to be cut if it's online-only. If it's a single-player experience that has online-only functionality specifically just to shut down the game in the future, and the online-only doesn't actually add any gameplay functionality, I'd agree with you. That's a shitty business practice. That's real.
They have decompiled and recreated entire games. Also, React OS and Wine are entire recreations of Windows API without looking at the source code, which is illegal. There's a difference between recreating the source code of a thing versus recreating the functionality of a thing. For when you're talking about people that have decompiled and like reverse engineered stuff, I think this is on the scale of like, first of all, these are huge projects involving tons of people. And I think sometimes you might be able to tweak a couple things to get some different functionality out of the end product itself, but you're not like you're not having like a full, like, oh, I basically have the source code for this thing now that I've decompiled it and I can do whatever the I want. Like I remember for Final Fantasy Tactics 1.3, you're like tweaking individual things and you think that like, I think this impacts like this limit here. So if we change this here, we could do that. But you're not like going through like, oh, let's like add all this new stuff. And oh, this is so easy to understand. And like, these are the project I think is a much more massive undertaking than how do you think games are cracked? They're not cracked by reverse engineering the source code of the game.
Really rare. And in the specific cases where it does happen, we should call out that, not just all games and not all live service games. Further, there's more context to this too. The Crew itself came out in 2014, but it actually had a sequel that came out in 2018. And then it had another sequel that came out in 2023. And if we go to the Crew's SteamDB, which again is not going to be all of the player base for this, it's only going to show the ones who were playing it through Steam. It was on multiple platforms. We look at the max here. It did.
For Mario 64, we literally have the Time Games source code understood basically, but it's an older game and it took manual work from people. Yeah, but you got to understand. This is why I keep saying for modern software projects, what is it? What is the space on Mario 64 ROM size? This is 8 megabytes, and this took what 20 years? with how many thousands of people contributing? Like, this is a massive undertaking. This is a very, 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 very complicated thing to do to figure this out.
Start out with a sizable amount of community, and then it degraded. And it had a major drop-off in 2018, which is the same year that it launched a sequel. This is normal. When a sequel comes out, a lot of the player base, if the sequel doesn't suck, will move over to it. And then the servers effectively die. You can't run a live service game on this few players. You can't, most of the time, especially not if there's anything else that goes into it. And if we go into that anything else, and we can see that there was license problems. So on December 14th, 2023, Ubisoft delisted the crew and its expansions from digital platforms, suspended sales of microtransactions, and announced that the game servers would...
They're doing it with the Legend of Zelda games, but yeah, it takes years of work, but they do end up with a source code that compiles to a one-to-one Yes, but this is so much work on projects that are multiple orders of magnitude less in size, like 0.00001% of the size of current modern projects.
Which 2023, Ubisoft delisted the crew and its expansions from digital platforms, suspended sales of microtransactions, and announced that the game servers would shut down on March 31st. So they gave them 3 months. Usually I would say, hey, 6 months is probably a better deal, but if they're going to do 3 months, they're going to do 3 months. The only thing that I'd be interested...
So some people are bringing up bundled software, bundled libraries. Fuck you. Like, is this a problem? Maybe, but this is the thing that the law would seek to change, right? If you're going to buy a license to bundle something that allows you to make a server work, well, then the license would extend to making project files available to people offline, right? That's an arbitrarily, trivially easy licensing issue to solve, I think.
Interested outside of that is if there was a contractual obligation to do more than 3 months and they didn't follow it, if it was in the terms of service or not. Citing upcoming server infrastructure and licensing constraints. What were those licensing constraints? Well, it turns out that all of the cars in the game were licensed from the car companies, and a 10-year...
It's not just about decompiling it. A lot of code gets copy-pasted to future games and allows people to backdoor into future games much easier. Hosting files to people. Server files are not raw source code. Nothing. I don't believe you. Even if you told me, even if somebody said they worked at Blizzard, you told me, I wouldn't believe you. That to host a server, you're doing a fresh compile and then running your new binary every time you're hosting a server. I don't believe you. I just wouldn't even believe that's the case. Even if Mr. Blizzard himself said that, I would not believe you. These are binaries that are created. Once they're created, that's the file that you use, or that's the program that you use, and whatever else bullshit you have to load on top of it. It's not like, oh, let's look at the source code today and do a fresh compile and then do a fresh server host. No, there's 100% chance that you could give an executable to somebody, a simple server files or whatever the fuck would go, and then some config file to host a server, okay? Fuck you. I don't believe you.
Running game likely means that they had license to them for 10 years, and that means that it would likely reopen for negotiation. Now, I understand that's speculation, but I've seen this type of a deal many times.
At Destiny, the cost to do what you're asking is more like 10 times, not a little more. Bullshit. I don't believe you on that either. Bullshit. That it would be that much harder to just create a configurable server? If it's that much more difficult, then your project is a nightmare anyway, and you need to have better practices. We'll talk about it in our next sprint, okay?
Times in the industry while I've been working in it. So it's not unlikely. If you're going to have to renegotiate on a game that has so few players and is not turning a profit anymore, you're probably just going to forego the renegotiation. And if those servers are aging, you're not going to want to recreate that infrastructure. And there are some people and that means that it would likely reopen for negotiation. Now understand that's
fuck. Now you've made me miss this fucking video. It's about architecture. I'm in stream descriptions. Make it hostable on a virtual machine then. Couldn't you specify a virtual machine? What architecture is so fun? Type words in chat that I'm too hard to understand. Tell me, what architecture is so ancient in networking that it's, what is it, like IPv3 or something I've never heard? Like, is this, what is it? What is so ancient that you could never, what? I don't believe you guys.
31st. So they gave them 3 months. Usually I would say, hey, 6 months is probably a better deal. But if they're going to do 3 months, they're going to do 3 months. The only thing that I'd be interested outside of that is if there was a contractual obligation to do more than 3 months and they didn't follow it, if it was in the terms of service or not.
Not hardware architecture, software architecture. The requirements that have stacked up over time. What, are you saying that like a server to host one of these games has to be like a rack of like 59 GTXs or whatever? Wait. Matchmaking and anti-cheat and host migration are part of so many modern multiplayer games. Bundle it all together and give somebody a deployable version. I'm sorry. I won't, because you guys are lazy. And that's why AI is coming for all of your jobs. Okay? That's why AI is coming for all of your jobs, because you're lazy motherfuckers. All right?
Citing upcoming server infrastructure and licensing constraints. What were those licensing constraints? Well, it turns out that all of the cars in the game were licensed from the car companies, and a 10-year running game likely means that they had license to them for 10 years.
There is proprietary server tech that is required for lots of games. But I don't believe you. So when Cloudflare or when AWS goes down for the day and half the internet dies, Where are all of the team leads and managers like, wait a second, I thought we were using proprietary servers. Like, well, yeah, but we did a lot, and it just happens to also be deployable on the largest server infrastructure in the entire world, and it does work there. Like, well, come on, if you can deploy on AWS, then any ordinary person should be able to deploy the same thing. Or on AWS if they wanted to. They can even buy rent time on a server and do it there. Stop.
3 months and they didn't follow it, if it was in the terms of service or not. Citing upcoming server infrastructure and licensing constraints. What were those licensing constraints? Well, it turns out that all of the cars in the game were licensed from the car companies. And a 10-year running game likely means that they had license to them for 10 years. And that means that it would likely reopen for negotiation. Now, I understand that's speculation, but I've seen this type of a deal many times in the industry. Well,
I didn't even listen to him. You guys are riling me up. Okay.
Be a better deal, but if they're going to do 3 months, they're going to do 3 months. The only thing that I'd be interested outside of that is if there was a contractual obligation to do more than 3 months and they didn't follow it, if it was in the terms of service or not. Citing upcoming server infrastructure and licensing constraints. What were those licensing constraints? Well, it turns out that all of the cars in the game were licensed from the car companies, and a 10-year running game likely means that they had license to them for 10 years, and that means that it would likely reopen for negotiation. Now, I understand that's speculation, but I've seen this type of a deal many times in the industry.
Licensing is easy. You just have a different license. I don't like it when people will put up the dumbest roadblocks. Like, hey, you know how we said we were going to drive to Tampa? I actually want to drive to Jacksonville. Well, the issue is we only have enough gas in the tank to go to Tampa. Oh, yeah, so we can't do it. I see. Why don't we just get some more fucking gas?
Industry, and while I've been working in it. So it's not unlikely. If you're going to have to renegotiate on a game that has so few players and is not turning a profit anymore, you're probably just going to forgo the renegotiation. And if those servers are aging, you're not going to want to recreate that infrastructure. And there are some people that will say, well, just make it all single player. Well, I've explained that that doesn't make any sense in the first place. If you're making it all single player, you have to carve off all of that, and it's developer time and money. When you already have sequels out and the game has basically no players left anyway, it makes more sense to just move on. I don't find that to be a problem from the developer perspective, and I understand that people find that to be a problem from the player perspective. These are two different ideologies, and that's okay to have two different ideologies. I just won't agree with it because I understand the burden that puts if we raise that problem in the way that we are right now. If you try to tell me that every studio needs to run their live service game indefinitely or not want to run one at all, then no one's going to run them. And we're going to miss out on adventures.
Well, isn't that the whole point of allowing players to run them?
Like Final Fantasy XIV. And even though I don't play anymore, League of Legends or any other live service game, any of them. You're talking everything, like even phone games, as funny as that is. A lot of people don't realize that phone games require online-only activity. What about things like Pokemon Go? What about stuff like Monster Hunter Now? What about any of these? We'd never get any of them. And that's why I think this needs to not be vague. It needs...
Nothing required. There's nothing special. There's nothing special about a server online. It's just another program. Well, I mean, there can be some incredibly unique proprietary server art, but it's not for the fucking video game shit. There's nothing ultra special here that can't be emulated. There's not some quantum flux computation station that is the only machine in the universe that can handle the calculations necessary to see if your little brother is cheating in Call of Duty or not.
To be specific about the business practice it's trying to defeat, which is specifically companies that are doing this under the guise of it being a single player game, but adding online-only functionality that is not necessary and doesn't add any gameplay elements. That's the problem. So now we're going to go to Ross, otherwise known as Accursed Farms, the creator of this initiative, and one of the ones that's pushing it the most online. I'm going to let him say exactly why he thinks that this will go through very easily and why it is important, and then I'm going to tell you why I don't agree with it.
Becomes law in the EU? Yeah, it might be. Now, it's not a guarantee, but I think if we get the signatures, this passes. Why do I say that? Well, it's a few factors. Politicians like easy wins, and this doesn't require them to do much at all. And unless it involves gambling or protecting children...
Software as a service dependencies seem like one of the biggest issues. If my game server depends on a service by another company running on their servers, how does that continue past the game's lifetime with no one paying that other company? Well, you know what? I bet somehow in the code, you can put an or thing, and then type in null for no value if that other service is down. What other internet service are you relying on that would make your server completely and totally broken if you weren't able to query some other service created by a whole other different company? Give me an example of what we would be talking about here. Could be a database. What are all these proprietary database deployment methods that are completely like proprietary, that are totally inaccessible to anybody else? Nobody has cracked how to do a database besides some other company that, I don't believe it. I just don't believe it. I don't think these are real problems. You sound like a lazy dev who knows words, who are trying to say, well, you can't do a thing because you're lazy. I don't believe you. I don't believe it. Maybe flight simulator that uses real-time weather data. That's a good example, okay? So if it pings something like, my guess is going to be there's a lot of public servers like Google or whatever, but this would be a thing. And I think that the company, and I think everybody would agree that they would be fine with this, right? Is that if you had a flight simulator game and say that it pinged Google, whatever bullshit, You would have a thing where if it tries to ping that server, or if it tries to query that server for information, if it can't get it, then it would just say, oh, this is unavailable. And then at the very least, well, fine, then you can't get mad at the developer. Now it's up to them to maintain that. And maybe Google makes a license or whatever where you can pay to have access to it from your machine or your IP so that you can query from your game. There are a billion different ways you can solve all of these problems. I know that there are, okay? It's not 1874 and our computers are a bunch of women that we've locked in basements to do math problems for us. Okay, there's a billion different ways that you can, I'm sure, that you could figure this out.
Politicians generally don't care about video games, so this isn't of big consequence to them or most of their constituency.
I'm going to stop it there for a moment. The assertion that politicians just like easy wins, so this legislation will go through, but the politicians don't care about a multi-billion-dollar global industry and that it doesn't matter to their constituencies is incredibly absurd to me. I don't think this is the right direction at all for a movement like this. I think it's incredibly damaging and it makes our entire industry look bad, both on the player side and the developer side. If we're going to...
What is even the thing Pirate Software is complaining about? Okay, here's this issue, okay? Quick reminder, okay, that if you're joining chat and you think I'm like a software developer, I don't know anything about programming, okay? So I get incredibly passionate about things I have no understanding of. Only when it comes to this, because I like triggering all my engineers in chat. Here's the issue that's happening. And then I'll tell you where Pirate Software is on this, because this is the perfect 115 IQ, okay, high mid-wit trap to fall into. Here's the issue, okay? This isn't just true in software development, okay? This is true in all things in life. There are some things in life where the perception is that it's incredibly difficult, and it is incredibly difficult, okay? So being an Olympic athlete, that seems like it's really difficult. And it is really difficult, okay? Being addicted to heroin, that seems like it'd be pretty easy to do. And it is really easy to get addicted to heroin, okay? Some things in life seem like they'd be maybe fairly simple, but they're actually incredibly difficult to do. What would an example of this be? Somebody give me an example of something that seems like it would be incredibly, or no, I'm sorry. It seems to be very easy, but it's actually incredibly difficult to do. I don't want to do losing weight. Heroin. Wait, that doesn't have an E at the end. Maybe, you know what? I'll say doing high G stuff, I think. I don't know if it's the same or if all the suits do the work for you, but back when I used to watch videos of people doing high G maneuvers, they have to do a whole bunch of weird shit. They have to like kick their legs and they got to like take weird breaths and they got to contract their muscles to stay like conscious or whatever. There's like a lot of work that goes into it. It seems like, oh, I guess, I don't know, you just like don't pass out like a retard, but there's actually a lot of work. And then there's stuff that seems really, really, really difficult, but it's actually incredibly easy. I would say literally all forms of, I think there's a lot of art stuff that fits here. So like for music, if you're a good musician, sometimes people can hear a song and play it, and it's like, oh my God, that's crazy difficult. But if you're trained, it's like, well, no, that's actually just very, very, very easy. Although I'm qualifying that a little bit with the training. Okay. Here's the issue with software people. Okay. Now, rightfully, okay, sometimes you might have a program and a manager or a CEO, some guy might come up to you and say like, hey, can we add this thing? Should be super easy to do, right? And it might seem like a really easy thing to do, but it's actually an unbelievably difficult thing to change. It would actually be crazy. Let's say that we had like Twitter that existed, but there were like no DMs. There were no private messages, right? So it's like, oh, can we just add DMs so we can private message people, right? Well, they can tweet. We should be able to DM each other, right? But like the stuff that you would need to send private messages between accounts, well, it seems like, well, if you can tweet, you can just send a private message, right? But that's like a whole different process. It's a whole different thing. So that might seem like an easy thing to do, but there's a lot of work that goes into that. The problem is that like loser programmers are so used to hearing stuff like this. Sometimes they start to pretend that every single thing is like this. These people in chat, by the way, these are all the people that are going to be crying in 5 years that AI stole their jobs. You ask them for anything, and they'll be like, "Oh, that's actually way harder than you think. Actually, there's a dependency there, and there's actually nothing because it's depending on something else." And it's like you can't like write an API so anything could like act. Actually, no, because I don't do that. It's actually way harder. You don't understand. It's because you have to like do a whole bunch. It's actually really hard to do all of this stuff because it's like never been. And they'll give you an excuse for fucking everything. Okay, these are fucking losers who they will make an excuse and they'll say everything's hard. It's not true. Okay, some stuff is hard, but not everything is hard. It's 2025. Okay, there's a fuck ton of cool shit you can do today with software and programs and platforms and Docker and Wine and Linux and all cool computer stuff. Okay, but sometimes for developers, whenever you ask them to do anything, all right, their brains shut down and they're like, actually, you're basically asking me to reverse engineer how they built the pyramids. I don't know where Stonehenge came from. And that's what my modern 2025 application that I built in React is, okay? It's indecipherable. There's no way to change any part of it whatsoever. And to do so would require 20,000 man hours of a A+ dev team pulled from both AWS and Google. And it's like, get the f out of here. So every time somebody says something like, hey, couldn't you like keep a game online afterwards? They come up with all these like, well, actually it's hard because the server, it can't be hosted on Windows. And it's like, okay, I'm pretty sure even Windows probably has like VMs for other environments or whatever, right? It's like, and when I say VMs, okay, stuff used to be hard on computers, right? Like if I wanted to do something, I would have to start Googling all sorts of instructions on, but now it's probably retardedly easy. My guess is I could probably get like Linux fully running on some whatever bullshit distro by watching a fucking YouTube video and like double clicking the right things. All right. It used to be really hard. You used to have to do a lot of shit, but everything today is built for retards and by retards. All right. So this idea that it would be impossible to deploy a server locally, or that would be impossible because actually this was made before something, and it's like, okay, is there like a config file where you can change true to false and it would fix that whole problem? Well, or like, actually this is it relies on like another service or whatever. Can it be bundled with it? No. Can you just turn it off? Maybe. Could you write an API to let somebody else plug into it? Well, that would actually require so much work. Is there already an API written for it, but it's just like hard-coded to use the other thing? Could you just like not do that? Well, and that's why AI is going to eat all of their jobs, okay? All of you guys, we're back to this. I don't care. All right.
$1 global industry, and that it doesn't matter to the constituencies is incredibly absurd to me. I don't think this is the right direction at all for a movement like this. I think it's incredibly damaging and it makes our entire industry look bad, both on the player side and the developer side. If we're going to be putting forward anything that may eventually turn into legislation, it should be passing because it's the right thing to do for consumers and developers, and that there's some kind of a middle ground, not just because it's an easy win and politicians don't care. This sets us off on a completely wrong foot.
EU law is already unclear on a lot of this practice anyway.
And that's dangerous. If we're going to be setting precedent, which could change the way that law works all the way down the road, then we need to be sending the right message, which this is sending a vague message that doesn't cover the actual problem. So this is not a win to me. This is a huge risk.
And we would be...
Actual question, what is your guess in terms of cost that it would take to replace a game engine like UE5 to a custom-made engine? How many companies would do this? The cost for that, to replace Unreal Engine 5 with a fully custom engine, my guess is $50 billion. But when people make custom engines, a custom engine is like 98% the same underlying shit with like 2% changed. And people will say, this is my custom implementation of this, is my custom thing. When people are making custom engines, they're not rebuilding every single part. I don't know if you would call it the stack or whatever. They're not redoing how like pixels are rendered on the ground. They're not like redesigning from the ground up, like everything. Here's my guess. I don't know fuck all. My guess is UE5 is probably like 70% of the code of like UE4, which is probably like 70% of the code of like UE3. My guess is if you would have fucking dragged some old motherfucker out of their grave and have them look at UE5, some guy would be like, holy shit, I remember writing that in call when I was studying Quake 1, okay, is maybe now sometimes there are like huge redesigns that involve a significant change, but like most like custom stuff is not rebuilt completely from the ground up. And even when people say built from the ground up, it doesn't mean they're redesigning every single subcomponent of a thing. Okay. I don't even know what I'm screaming at. I don't even care that much.
Be making it easy for them to settle it. It falls in line with other consumer practices. You know how when you buy something, you're generally allowed to keep it?
In the case of live service games, in the terms of service for those, you are not buying the game. You're buying a license to the game. And that's the part that's really different here. If we don't like the idea of live service games as a whole, I get it. Don't play live service games then. Don't agree to those terms. But if we're into this weird idea...
But when everybody starts making live service games, also this like you buy a license and not the game is who cares? Then just change the license then. Like that's all people are asking, no?
That we need to get rid of all live service games or damage that practice in any way to keep in line with consumer policies. It is in line with consumer policies. If it wasn't, it wouldn't be there in the first place. So this doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. You're not...
What?
buying the game, you're buying a license to the game. In the niche cases where a studio is trying to sell a game as if you are buying it or purchasing it or using that language specifically and they give you a live service game instead, I agree that should change. That language should change. You are not purchasing the game. You're not buying the game. You are paying to have a license to a live service experience. I get that. Is that what this is doing though? The initiative is not trying to call that out specifically. It's trying to say that all games need to stay in a functional, playable state, which is not calling out the language that is being used to manipulate the player. Call that out specifically, not this vague bullshit.
And finally, this is a diversion from really serious topics that politicians would prefer not to deal with.
That's really gross to me as well. The idea that this is just a diversion from serious topics and they can get an easy win in and we can just push it through and there won't be a lot of...
Oh, so sorry. The reason why I drew that whole thing in pain is because I think that Pirate Software is the master of trying to pretend that every single ask that you ever make of a software developer is actually infinitely complex, when in reality, no, you're just lazy.
Push back on it and...
Or
they're not going to have to think about it too hard. That's crazy dangerous, dude. If you're going to be setting precedent, if you're going to be putting forward something that you want to start a conversation to eventually become legislation, and these are the reasons for it, not only can I not agree with the initiative, but I can't agree with you. And I think that the tactics that you're using here are really disgusting. So yes.
But regardless if it'd be possible, I should still have the right to completely shut down my game. Should you? I don't know. That feels weird. Or I feel like at that point, it should be made upfront more clear to the customer, like what exactly you're buying. And it shouldn't even be called buying. That word should be banned. It should be called renting. You're paying $60 to rent this game until the person decides to revoke your access to it, all right?
I won't agree with that, and I won't agree with Ross. There's no way around that. I think this is gross. To sum it all up, no, I will not be supporting the initiative Stop Killing Games. You're not going to change my mind on it because I find this language to be incredibly vague and damaging to the rest of our industry. I think that it will be bad for both developers and players down the line in the way that it is currently written. And I think that starting a conversation that doesn't get to the core of the issue is both wasted time and leads to potentially bad outcomes. So if we want to talk about this, let's talk about the actual bad business practices. In the case that a studio is making a live service game and they sell it to you as a product, they say that you are purchasing the game or you are buying the game, when in reality you're actually purchasing or buying a license to that game. I think that we should be fighting about that. That needs to go away. A player should be well informed at the point of purchase that they are purchasing a license, not buying a game. And the reason that we have those licenses in the case of client-server interactions like we had before, we're talking about client-server games, is so that they can ban you when you cheat at them. They revoke your license. That's why they revoke your license, to protect the gameplay of every other player that you're impacting when you cheat at these games. That needs...
Okay, you might have a gap in your understanding of game engines. If you take your game that uses UE5 and try to replace that, it would take anywhere between 3 to 4 years with a sizable team. I work on game engines for a living. Well, I don't know what you're talking about when you say that. You think that you guys could build from nothing a custom game engine that would have the same feature set or capabilities as Unreal Engine 5? You think you could do that with a team of devs in 3 to 4 years? It takes people more time to build games on existing engines than I don't... What do you realize you're getting baited? Okay, true. Just kidding.
It's to exist, but it needs to be better informed to the player at time of purchase. So I agree on that. This doesn't bring that up though. It just attacks all video games that have online-only components and says that they need to keep being able to be played indefinitely. That doesn't make any sense to me. Aside from that, a lot of people really like live service games as they exist now. So trying to kill off all live service games, as some people have said online, doesn't make any sense either. Live service games are a great way to get away from the real world. They're about social interaction between players. Some people get married in them. Some people met their spouse in them and then got married in them. It's a really cool thing for a point in time in which you're having that social experience. And to destroy that just...
He's saying swap it with another engine? Yeah, sure, but like, listen, I'm not even to the limits of my knowledge. I'm way out beyond any of my knowledge on those. My guess is going to be swapping from one engine to another. It probably super depends on what you're using that engine for. For instance, when it comes to graphics, there might be things that UE5 does that other engines do comparably, and swapping from one to another might literally be as easy as just like moving textures to a different environment and just clicking run, and it basically works. And there might be some things that the UE5 engine does that are very specific to the UE5 engine that are either unduplicatable in other engines or require a totally different implementation or require a totally different workaround in order to get it to work, such that like there might be two games that might appear kind of similar and one would take a fuck ton of work to transfer engines because it's relying on stuff that UE5 does really well, exceptionally well. And keep in mind too, you're not just creating a program that works when you're talking about games, you're creating a program that works where working is qualified as like can run live, right? So it might be that UE5 does something a lot more efficiently as well, and doing it on another engine might still do the same thing, but now it's like way less efficient, and now you've got to like cut from other areas. I don't know, to transferring from one engine to another. I don't even know if you could ever extrapolate that. But I don't know. I don't have an idea. But I feel like it's probably not the case. Like it would probably depend on why you're using that particular engine, what features you're using from it, and then how unique that feature set is to that particular environment versus another, would be my guess. Hey, Steve, I just want to say thank you. I'm graduating this fall in bioengineering and never would have gotten here without you opening the 8H board for me. I went from failing to straight A's, completely changed my life. Cool, Alavon. Good for you, buddy.
Because you don't like them is very weird. I don't think that makes a lot of sense to me. I also don't think it makes sense the way that Ross is posing this is why it's going to pass. I think that's incredibly inflammatory and could lead to a lot of damage to both what he's trying to stop and to games as a whole. To say that the government just doesn't care and this is an easy win and we're going to get it through is disingenuous. You're talking about a multi-billion-dollar global industry. To think that the government isn't going to be meticulous.
Oh, yeah, but none of this for doing server files, none of this has to do with changing the engine, though. Yeah, so I don't know why that's not part of this conversation. Right?
Damage to both what he's trying to stop and to games as a whole. To say that the government just doesn't care and this is an easy win and we're going to get it through is disingenuous. You're talking about a multi-billion-dollar global industry. To think that the government isn't going to be meticulously looking through this and looking for flaws and holes is absurd. So I don't think that's honest at all, and I find it disgusting. So for everyone who's mad about that, fine. Be angry about it. I'm not going to change my stance on that because I can't agree with this, both as a dev and a player. I see the danger involved, I see the vagueness in the language, and it doesn't make sense to me. If we want to fight for better conditions for players, then fight the actual problem. Don't make new.
Okay, you're right. You know what? Let's do this. Chat GPT. Let's fucking go. I want you to write a 10-question quiz about video game programming that an employed junior software dev should be able to answer. Make this quiz a multiple choice and reveal the answers and reveal the answer after each question, but keep the answer hidden until I scroll down. Something like that? All right, let's fucking go. Let's do it. Okay. Make this quiz multiple choice and only do one question at a time and hide the answer from me until I am ready to move on to the next thing. All right, we're about to BTFO all of the video game programmers in chat. Here we go. All right. In most 2D games, what is the main purpose of a game loop? To handle user logins and authentication, to load assets like textures and sounds once at startup, to repeatedly update game logic and render the scene, to compile the game code into machine language. Well, the game loop is obviously here to continually refresh the scene using the game's logic. That's the answer is C, of course. Obviously. Which of the following data structures is most suitable for implementing an efficient collision detection broad phase in a 2D game with many objects? Oh, well, for a 2D game where you've got a lot of objects that you're colliding with, well, obviously we would never use linked lists or binary heaps. Now, quad trees are good for 3D things, so a hash map, I believe that's what Doom and Wolfenstein use, so god damn it. Quad trees are commonly used to spatially partition 2D space, reduce the number. Okay, that's okay. We can miss one. In Unity, which of these methods is called once per frame on a mono behavior script? I mean, we're updating, of course, obviously. In C++, what is the primary reason for using a virtual destructor in a base class of a game object hierarchy? The virtual destructor, now if you're a beginner, obviously, you would always have this in your base class of any game object hierarchy in order to allow derived class to run properly when deleting via a base pointer, to inline the destructor function, and to prevent overriding member functions. To speed up, okay, hold on. Okay, it's memory allocation? No, hold on. I'm trying to remember this. This is such elementary stuff, you know? To allow derived class structure to run properly when deleting. Nah, not that. To inline. It's either C or D. I'm trying to remember, guys. To inline. Seems kind of like that's like inline, you know? To prevent overriding. You don't run to. I'm going to go ahead and go with C here, I think. C feels correct. This quiz. Fuck this. Okay. 8 out of 10 is still okay. All right. We can do this. Okay. What is the main advantage of using delta time in game loops? Oh, well, it simplifies multi-threading in games. It ensures the game runs at 60 FPS. It allows movement and animations to be frame rate independent, and it reduces the number of draw calls per frame. Oh, definitely C. Back in the day, before they started using delta time, the frame rate actually dictated a lot of the game logic updates. So, you know, okay, there we go. True. There you go. Okay. In Unreal Engine's blueprint system, I've done a lot of work in UE, you know. Which of these best describes its perfect purpose for the blueprint system? I'm trying to remember. Now, I use my own custom engine built from the ground up in 3 to 4 years with a small team. In Unreal Engine's blueprint system, which of these best describes its purpose? A low-level shader compiler, a C++ code obfuscator? No. A node-based visual scripting language? No. and a file packaging tool. Unreal Engine's blueprint. Like file packages, like that's like a blueprint, kind of, right? But okay, 7 out of 10. We can do this. Wait, how many have I missed? Okay, hold on. Which of the following best describes object pooling in game programming? Encrypting objects before sending them over the network, storing game object in a binary file, reusing objects from a pre-allocated pool instead of repeatedly creating and destroying them, and combining multiple objects into one to optimize draw calls. That's when you pool the pools, Sometimes I build entire objects out of, I pool a square and then I just build all of my assets out of one thing. That's C, obviously. Got it. What is a shader most commonly used for in 3D games? Oh, shaders are used for lighting and surface effects on graphics hardwares. Obviously. Okay. Question 9. Which of the following is not a common component of an entity component system architecture? Entity, component, system, and subroutine. This is a trick question. I'm going to say D. Okay, there we go. And what is VSync primarily used for in game rendering? Increasing polygon count, synchronizing the game's frame rate with the monitor's refresh rate, and B, obviously. That's a pass. Tally, 7 out of 10? That's a pass. I'm going. Who do I work for now? Activision? Try again without multiple choice. Well, I've heard that like if you just write a bunch of it will always you always pass. Okay, I'll do a 5-question thing. Hold on. I want you to write a 5-question, or 4. We'll do a 4-question quiz about video game. Blah, blah. Make this quiz an essay answer quiz, and do only one question and hide the answer from me until I'm ready to move on to the next thing. Okay. Explain the role of the game loop in real-time game programming. Why is it essential, and what are its main responsibilities? Well, I feel like this is rehashing what we just learned in our prior test, right? Hold on. The role of the game loop is to continuously update the client with the information necessary to allow the user to continue to operate the game. It is essential because it allows the game to continue to function in a predictable manner as dictated by the programmer, and its main responsibilities are keeping track of things like updating the player's movement, the position, and things like, and things like the position of objects on the screen. Easy. That's an A+. Nice explanation. You captured the core idea. The game loop continues to update the game state and renders frames so the player can interact with it. But here's essay. Do they give me points per question? Does that mean I got it? Does it give me describe the concept of object pooling in game development. Why might a junior game programmer choose to implement object pooling? And what benefits does it provide? Easy. We just learned this. The concept of object pooling involves adding textures, involves loading textures into the VRAM in order to, and continuously utilizing them for a variety of objects instead of continuously wiping them from the VRAM and calling them again from storage. Let's do that. Okay. Why might a junior game programmer choose implement? Implementing object pooling allows you to quickly recreate objects on the screen. Allows you to quickly recreate objects on the screen without having to continuously reload the entire assets over and over again. That's what continuous means. Into the VRAM. Does object pooling happen in the VRAM? That's my guess. Give me an okay on that. You're on the right track. But object pooling more specifically refers to using actual game object instances. Oh, come on. Really? To avoid frequent recreation or destruction, which can be costly. Does this mean I didn't get that one right? Does that count or not? In the context of a 3D game engine, explain what a shader is and how shaders contribute to rendering realistic graphics. I don't actually know that much about shaders. When objects are drawn on the screen, simple polygons can be used to represent anything that the player might see. Shaders allow the GPU to change the appearance of rendered objects in more sophisticated ways that allow you to have dynamic things, that allow you to engage, activate, that allow you to show more sophisticated effects. I don't know. That allow you to dynamically, I don't even know if it's dynamic. I don't know. Shaders? It's probably not. That allow you to alter the appearance of rendered textures on screen in ways that might correspond to a change in lighting or lighting. Lighting, for instance. Okay, for instance. That makes it sound like I know more things I can say. Just give me a yes. Great explanation. You clearly described how shaders let the GPU manipulate the appearance of objects, especially for lighting and visual effects, which is essential for realism and 3D graphics. Okay, one more. Discuss why delta time is important in game development and how it affects movement and animation in games. Easy. Before delta time, games would have to tie the game loop, would have to tie functions, operations that would occur on screen to the actual frame rate rendered by the GPU. Delta time allows you to run different clocks for theoretical clocks, so it doesn't seem like I'm as committed. Different clocks for different sets of actions so that they can run independently from one another and not be reliant on each other to properly function. For instance, you wouldn't want a laggy game to cause one of your game's functions to run incorrectly, since it would if it were relying on the frame rate to be continuous for its calculations. That's an A+ answer. Give me a... Easy. That's it. You've captured the key idea that delta time decouples game logic from frame rate, ensuring the consistent... There it is. That's it. I'm basically a programmer, okay? That's it. Now do multiple choice senior game dev level. I barely got 7 out of 10 on the amateur one, okay? There's no way I could do the senior one, okay? Wait. What would you grade that essay quiz I just took on a scale from 1 to 100? 79 out of 100. We take those. How are you giving me 85? I wrote so much bullshit on this. Whatever. That's a pass, baby. We take those. Okay. This is the thing I really need to study. Hold on. I want you to write a 10-question quiz about being an effective Scrum Master that an employed senior team lead should be able to answer. What is the primary responsibility of a Scrum Master and a Scrum team? Writing user stories and defining acceptance criteria, managing the project timeline and assigning tasks, facilitating Scrum events and removing impediments, and approving the product release. Obviously, I'm just here to make your job easier, guys, and I'm making sure you're all scrumming correctly. That's a C, baby. During a sprint retrospective, what is the main goal? To assign tasks for the next sprint, to discuss what went well, what didn't, and how to improve, to review and accept completed work, and to update the project budget. What do you say to talk about what worked and what didn't work for our next sprint, guys, so that we know exactly what we can do next time? What is a time box in the context of Scrum? A tool for tracking employee working hours, a fixed duration allocated for an event or activity, the deadline for delivering the final product, and the total hours spent on development during a sprint. The time box is how much time you should be spending working on, or is it D? The total hours spent on development during a sprint. Time box. We're going to go with D. That's our total time box. I shouldn't have second guessed myself. Who is responsible for prioritizing the product backlog? The Scrum Master for prioritizing the product backlog, the development team, the product owner, the project manager. The project manager, right? Maybe? The product owner. What? Who cares? Okay, hold on. We still get an 8 out of 10. Okay, don't fret. What should the Scrum Master do if a team member is consistently missing daily Scrum meetings? What? Discuss the issue privately to understand and resolve the cause. Assign them extra tasks to catch up. Report them to HR. Now it should be D, but we'll be a nice Scrum Master. We'll go talk to them privately. Which is following describes a sprint goal, a detailed list of all tasks to be completed in the sprint, a high-level objective the team aims to achieve during the sprint, the total story points assigned to the sprint, and the release date for the product. Our sprint goal is just our macro-level objective, you know. How should a Scrum Master handle external interruptions during a sprint? Allow the team to address them immediately, regardless of sprint focus. Shield the team by managing and negotiating the interruptions outside the team. Let the product owner handle all interruptions without the Scrum Master's involvement, and ignore interruptions focused only on... We have to protect our team, and we need to get the external people to f*** off as the Scrum Master. Okay? What is the recommended duration for a daily Scrum meeting in a 2-week sprint? We should be able to do our stand-ups in 30 minutes. That sounds good. That's what I do for my teams. 15 minutes. Oh, because we do 4-week sprints. My bad. I fucked up. What is the purpose of the definition of done in Scrum? To define the sprint duration, to list all team member roles, to ensure work meets agreed quality and completeness standards before being considered complete, and to prioritize backlog items. It's not. Done is not. Done is not. I just have 2 more things I need to tweak real quick. And done is not. It's basically done. We just need somebody to look at it. Done is what we say done is, okay? That's C. Which of the following is not a formal Scrum event? Sprint planning, daily Scrum, sprint review, project kickoff, sprint planning, sprint review, daily Scrum. Ooh, project kickoff. That's cringe. That's an 8 out of 10, baby. 7 out of 10. I don't care. We're still going to go Scrum. I can't wait to Scrum with my team after this. Okay, we're done with this. Okay.
Hi, my name is...
Okay. The guy made a response to him, and then he made another response to the response or something. And then we'll watch the Stop Killing Games guy's response that he put 3 days ago.
Jason Thorhall, also known as PirateSoftware. And the other day I put out a video called Stop Killing Games saying why I would not support the initiative. Overall, it was actually quite positive. The analytics on it show that people really think it's a good idea.
Wow.
There's a huge amount of like ratio, and I received hundreds of comments from developers thanking me for putting it out because they can't speak publicly while they're at a business or a job elsewhere. A lot of the times,
oh, no, wait. Okay. The other guy didn't put out a response to him. He's just doing this as a general response, I guess. Okay.
major companies will fire you if you are speaking out of turn and cause a PR disaster for those companies. And since this is such a popular thing among players, most devs aren't going to say anything to you. So I am. So let's discuss the most common requirement of the initiative, which is games have to be left in a functional, playable state. Now, what happens if that game is a online-only live service game? Well, if you want that to stay in a functional, playable state, that means the devs have to release either server binaries or somehow carve off the game to be a single-player experience now. Some way to keep it functional and playable, right?
Like, this is what I hate. I don't understand why you guys can do this. This is a software dev thing. I don't know why. I don't know why you do it. I've had people do this to me before. The answer is, like, people will throw up roadblocks that don't even make sense, right? What about something like Pokemon Go? And the obvious answer is, these are not games that we would expect to be offline playable. We would exclude those. Easy. Next thing. Why are you even pretending like this is a problem? If there is a game that is heavily centered around exclusively like an online experience, then you just wouldn't, those games would be excluded from this license, obviously, right?
Now, many of you are requesting, yes, I should get the server binaries so that I can go and make private servers for this. But that doesn't make a lot of sense in the real world. And the reason why is because it leaves developers open to abuse. So let's explore that a little bit. Let's say that you made your own video game and you made a live service game. Maybe it's an MMO, maybe it's something else, right? And let's say that I want to monetize that game, but you don't allow monetization of the game by any other party. This makes sense because most creators don't allow for that. You can't just take someone else's art and profit off of it. Normal, right? So then I go, well, how am I going to force you to do this? Under this initiative, you would have to release the server binaries or keep the game in a functional, playable state at end of life. So I hit you with a ton of bots. I hit you with a ton of exploits. I attack your community. I destroy your Reddit. I go after your business. I go everywhere that I possibly can to make this cost as much as it possibly can for you.
So people already do this. People don't need any end of life guarantee to get server binaries to do this as well. People could already host a competing game and do this. All of these incentives already exist in every single way, size, shape, and form. And people already do stuff like this, but okay.
And it's not hard to do this. We saw the exact same thing happen in TF2 recently. The massive amount of bots that were attacking the game. This is not infeasible. This is something that is very easily attainable today. And let's say that this goes on long enough that your game dies because you can't afford it anymore and your studio has to shut down. At end of life, you now have to release those server binaries to keep the game in a functional, playable state. At which point I take those, I create a private server, and I monetize it. And some people have said, well, simply don't allow monetization of the server. Well, who's going to enforce that? If you
The law? I mean, you could simply do that now. You could say that the license, if you keep them in a permanent state, you're not allowed to monetize future servers. And if people do it, then you can sue them? Isn't that what court is for?
want a government initiative to enforce that, that means the government has to build a registry of all of those games and all of that intellectual property that shouldn't be monetized.
Don't you already have trademarks and copyrights associated with all of the games that are being created? Do those not already exist?
And then somehow enforce that with no one owning it because those studios have shut down. That's going to be a massive burden. On top of that, if you want to go the other route,
It's a massive burden to register a copyright?
the company has to go and control it. Well, what if the company's not around anymore? Is that just...
If the company's not around anymore, then who the cares? What, like, imagine the problem we're thinking. What if somebody wanted to host a global Pong server now, and they hosted the Pong server, and now they want to charge people money to join it, and now the original company, well, then who the cares? Then let them charge money to host the server. Who cares? Who's even being harmed at this point?
able to be monetized now? Again, this was obtained through abuse of the original creator. I don't think that's a good route. And this scenario gets even worse if you do allow monetization, because now I can just kill off your company and then monetize the server and no one will ever come after me. Now it's even more of a problem. So allowing monetization of this work is strictly worse. And for those of you out there that say, oh, this can be done right now, I could just destroy your studio and take your stuff anyway.
Yes.
You could, but this allows a route for it to be legal to do so.
How does this become legal just because you can do this afterwards? What?
That's the problem. After putting this out publicly and talking to people about it, this specific scenario on both YouTube and Discord and Reddit and a bunch of other locations, I got a couple of takes back. We're going to start with the most extreme position and kind of go from there. So in the most extreme, people said live service games shouldn't exist at all, and the initiative will kill them off for good, and that's a good thing. Well, you don't get to define what players get to play or not play. You also shouldn't be able to get to define what developers build or don't build. You should not have creative control over the developers, and you should not have control over what is in my Steam library or on my phone. That doesn't make any goddamn sense. Aside from that, the initiative does not purport to kill live service games. It would just make it incredibly difficult to build said games and add a lot of risk to it, which is why I'm bringing all of this up and why I don't support the initiative in the first place. A lot of people don't realize that this will slowly diminish live service games in the market because it's not an incentive for us to build them anymore, which means you get less multiplayer live experiences. That sucks. I like live service games. I enjoy playing things like Final Fantasy XIV. I enjoy going and playing in games in the past, at least, like League of Legends. These are games that are live service. They require a live service to run, and you shouldn't be able to take that away from people. And if that's your only position on this, not only are you disingenuous in what the initiative is purporting to try to achieve, but you're also aggressively attacking other players instead of trying to fix something. So the next one is that this is about games preservation, and that it needs to happen to preserve these types of games for future generations and for everyone to always have forever. But I would argue that this isn't actually preserving these games. Social games, such as, let's say, Apex Legends, require a number of players to be in the match at the same time so that you can have an experience that is only able to be obtained through lots of players interacting, right? It's a multiplayer game. You need a bunch of people. How many of you have felt negatively when an MMO dies? Or when a live service game dies? Oh, dead game. There's only 5 people online. Why would I play that? So why would you want to preserve a game in that state? That doesn't make any sense to me. You want to take down these live service games, put them up on a private server, and then play it with a couple of people. You're not bringing it back at its height. You're not taking a snapshot of what the game actually is. You're making it limp on in a way that doesn't make any sense.
But there are people that would do that. Like, there are people that would still want to play Halo 2 or Halo 3 or whatever the fucking host it. Like, if they want to do it, then let them. Why should that matter that much? Like,
that's not preservation. And for those that may stop there and go, but private servers can have a lot of players. Look at all the ones for World of Warcraft. Again, we talked about that. It opens up a route for abuse of the developers. So that is not a solution. And the last take that I got from this is, and it's the most reasonable to me, this is an initiative. It's not a law. Why are you upset? Just wait. I'm not going to wait. And the reason I'm not going to wait is because I see the start of this conversation not making sense. It's not including the actual developer side of the conversation. It's not showing the trials and problems that this could arise inside of the gaming industry for people who are actually making the games you play. I don't have any reason to be quiet about that. And many other developers aren't going to be able to speak on this. As I explained before, it's really easy to lose your job if you're working at a major studio and try to speak out of turn on something like this, especially with something people are so passionate about. It doesn't make any sense to stay quiet. And it also doesn't make any sense to wait until it's in a different form when I see that it has so many problems with the language as it is currently written. I should be able to be talking about this. In fact, I should be talking about this. I am a content creator specifically that is a game developer that has worked in this industry for 20 years. This is my wheelhouse. This is what I do. So for those who are calling for me to just be silent and sit in the corner, no. With all that being said, I do think there's a consumer protection thing that we can fix here. It's just not really what the initiative is about. I think that if you're going to buy a live service game, you shouldn't be told you're buying the game. You shouldn't be told that you're purchasing the game. You should be told explicitly that you are purchasing a license.
just as an alternate narrative to this PirateSoftware's trash take, the GTA 5 RP mod 5M that all the streamers play was created entirely by reverse engineering with 95% by one Russian that spawned its own entire ecosystem of private monetized servers, which was then bought out by Rockstar for lots of money. That singular story talks against almost every point this dump raises.
To that game. The reason why is because that license needs to be revoked anytime that you are cheating at the game and damaging the play experience of other players. While this is written in the TOS and the EULA, it's usually not clearly defined at point of sale. Or they throw a giant TOS in front of you and it doesn't really do anything because people skip past it. If at point of sale it says specifically, there's specific language stating that you are either leasing or purchasing a license or anything along those lines that you're not actually buying the game directly, I think it would go a long way to informing consumers of what they're doing and protect them from some of these business practices that they didn't realize they were engaging in. That makes a lot more sense to me than force all developers to leave the game in a functional playable state. And that's about it. That's all I really wanted to talk about with this. I hope that's clarified some things for some of you and some of the dangers that this can cause as it is currently written. If you're still mad about this, not much I can do about it. Outside of that, I'm going to be gone for the next 4 days, so if you expect me to respond or anything like that and you think I'm ducking the issue or hiding in some way, I'm not.
Okay, Neo Destiny 2 says, that guy is lying. They didn't reverse engineer the game. They reverse engineered the web API hooks so they could create a server for the game's executable. I'm assuming that's what he meant, right? The GTA 5 RP mod, I don't think had anything to do with reversing any part of, like, reverse engineering part of the game. It was just the whatever they used for the online hosting and the web engine, or not web engine, whatever allows people to connect to other people's games or whatever, right?
I'm just in Vegas because there's DEF CON going on, which is a hacking convention, and it's the first vacation I've had in 5 years.
Whoa!
To see my friends out there. So that in mind, see you.
DEF CON. Okay, somebody said watch Mudahar's response to this. Do I care that much? Shouldn't I just watch this? Well, I don't care about Mudahar's.
Hello.
Hi.
This is probably the final update to the Stop Killing Games campaign.
This is the guy who started it all. Good luck.
Though I'm coming at you a little bit like a time traveler would. It'll make sense in a minute. As a refresher, Stop Killing Games is a consumer movement to stop publishers from effectively destroying video games they have already sold to customers. Now, we've gone about this in many ways, but it's easiest to divide this up by things we've already done and things we can still do.
Okay.
Because there's about a dozen things we've already done. Yeah, in fact, here's a list if you want to pause this. Going over this again will be a video in itself. I'll talk more about some of this towards the end. So that just leaves things we can still do, which are only 2 items. One is for the UK to sign a government petition to bring this issue before Parliament. Though, keeping it real, I'm not terribly optimistic about this one, since the government response has been a mess by every definition. It's a long and boring story, but the short version is it's hit a bureaucratic roadblock and will stay stuck unless it gets more signatures. But the one that has a lot of power, so much so I think it could change the course of gaming history, is the European Citizens Initiative. Now, I said I'm approaching this like a time traveler because with the trajectory we're on, these are both going to fail. So I figure, why wait until they actually do to tell people? Both the petitions end in July. The Citizens Initiative in particular on July 31st. This video probably won't change the timeline. It's just a last-ditch attempt to wake people up on it. The European Citizens Initiative failing kind of stings. Again, this one is crazy powerful, but the hurdle we just couldn't get past was that it requires 1 million signatures from citizens of EU countries.
Damn.
And we've only made it just under halfway. That's really too bad, because I have high confidence this would have solved the problem of publishers destroying video games. Now, why do I say that? Well, what a lot of people don't realize is that in the EU especially, it's almost a
Just wanted you to see the clips of Pirate calling all this stupid shit and being more unhinged in his streams. Mudahar shows some of those clips in a video, that's all. Oh, wait, what? Link the Mudahar video then.
state of lawlessness regarding the practice of game destruction. Okay, I don't want to put people to sleep here, but the quick legal argument is that the vast majority of games with an online requirement say they can be terminated at any time for any reason. Or Blizzard likes to say any or no reason. But according to the EU Commission, that might be a violation of Directive 93/13 EEC, which protects...
Hello, guys and gals, me Mudahar, and we got a pretty big update to that Stop Killing Games story, ladies and gentlemen. Now, Stop Killing Games, for anybody that doesn't know, yes, 2 days ago I made a video where I talked about Stop Killing Games. I talked about how the initiative, basically was kind of at its finishing line, and there really wasn't a lot of positivity in terms of it crossing its finish line. Now, of course, since then, ladies and gentlemen, there's been plenty of content creators that have covered this story. Charlie, me, obviously Ross, the person who spearheaded this campaign to start off with. And, 2 days ago, the actual initiative was at like 455,000 signatures. Today, ladies and gentlemen, in 2 days, it crossed 51%. Now, I really think a lot of this comes from the fact that obviously one of the biggest voices that is now talking about Stop.
Wait, it's this video instead? What?
Hello, guys and gals, me Mudahar, and today I've got a bit of a sad little gaming video to talk about. Now, one of my favorite channels on the internet, Accursed Farms, Ross, the fellow behind something known as Stop Killing Games, an initiative that's simple. Stop killing video games. You and I love playing video games. We probably play video games released literally today. Okay, there's a game called Death Stranding 2. I'm pretty excited for it. It's coming out in a couple days. Boom, excited. But I also play a lot of old stuff. I was playing Silent Hill 3 in a couple videos ago. Okay, like a PS2 emulator. I play old stuff, new stuff all the time. I think video games is a lot like art. When people go out and they listen to like Beethoven and shit like that, music from like back in the day. It's stuff that's preserved. And when it comes to maybe the end of Stop Killing Games, the legality of allowed. But see, the problem is because it requires a connection to the internet. When that server goes offline, this game is effectively killed. It's dead. Now you might remember, obviously, with Stop Killing Games when we first talked about it. Ubisoft had a game called The Crew, which went offline. They took away people's actual video game purchase, and it just kind of went up and poof into the air. Damn. This is what's going to happen with Need for Speed if things don't get addressed. Damn. Now, again, to give you an idea, imagine if you go to a store, right, and you have a copy of Need for Speed. You go up, you go to the cashier, you're like, hey man, can I have Need for Speed? And they're like, well, sure thing. It'll be $59.99. And you're like, okay. And you go home, you install your game, and it's like all good. You hold on. I feel like during the Stop Killing Games, increasing number of so again, you're looking at hill battling finals. So my audience are 100. Why this you can make change happen there. Then developers who are thinking about sunsetting their games have to think about one of the biggest markets, and usually that'll just if all of a sudden Halo Infinite was supposed to be like at its end of life, right? Halo Infinite is a live service game to an extent. Now imagine at the end of its life, who's the company behind it, 343 Interactive or Microsoft? If at the end of its life they were like, all right, we're not going to service the multiplayer, we're not going to do whatever, but we'll cut the tether to the actual internet services and allow you to like maybe play a LAN match, do something split screen, play the single player, do some Forge stuff. We're not going to give you access to obviously matchmaking servers because they're not there anymore. We're also not going to give you leaderboards or things like that require a server to be active, right? So that's a reasonable experience. Similar to like The Crew, right? Like imagine if Ubisoft was like, all right, we're removing The Crew from sale, we'll give you access to this game's single player component, which that's the majority of it. You just can't do anything with the online leaderboards or online matchmaking because reasonably that doesn't exist. And reasonably is a strong word here. Now when it comes to Ross, obviously this is not supposed to be some crazy drama between creators or anybody. It's just supposed to be gamers who look at good law, good objectives, and think, yes, I care about video games, I want video games preserved, let's just try to get these companies to at least respect video games and their preservation going forward. It's something that should be, bipartisan, something that should just not be a divisive effort.
Okay, gotcha.
Right? That's a morbid way to put it, but like music, like movies, like software, like other softwares in general, not just video games, you want to make sure that this stuff lasts hundreds of years in the future. And you want to make sure you lay the groundwork now so that going into the future from 2025, 2026 onwards, we as gamers don't have to worry about future games facing this crisis today.
So just understand, the Stop Killing Games initiatives is basically we don't want single-player games to have DRM that the developers can turn off and thus render the single-player games inactive anymore. This is what they want to change. They need to be specific that they're talking about single-player games that do not need a server to support them.
No.
And as much as they want it to be about specifically games, whereas a single-player game has always online functionality. It would impact every live service game that exists.
So again, this is a distinction that wasn't even being made. Nobody's talking about just single-player games or multiplayer games or anything of this nature, okay? We're just talking necessarily about every game under the sun, okay? That's realistically everything that's it. And Ross made a pretty good slide in his video where he talked about it too, like just as a good example. For instance, games that are sold as a one-time purchase that don't require a connection. So say you're playing Shenmue 1 and 2, the HD collection. Well, congratulations, you're not even part of the equation. The game is just a one-time purchase. It's a purely single-player experience. No one gives a shit. It's not being destroyed. As long as you have the disc and functional hardware, you're good. Games sold as a one-time purchase with no stated expiration date that require a connection to the publisher or affiliated parties. So yes, in certain cases like this, you're talking about games like I mentioned earlier, Need for Speed, where you buy it once, but you need to connect to EA servers to play it. Well, going forward, developers and publishers should have some plan going forward so that down the road, when the server is stopped, they can at least push a patch to the game to give you reasonable functionality. That's not outlandish. Games that are completely free, again, no impact. If you want to download Jet's Rampage, the like PC game from like back in 2003, you can download that and play it just fine. No issues there. Microtransactions for games sold as a one-time purchase with no stated expiration date. The publisher would be required to implement an end-of-life plan when support ends, so the customer's microtransaction would not be permanently disabled. Imagine if you bought a video game, even if it's a single player or if it's a multiplayer game, you bought like a $20 skin. There's a $40 skin for like Rainbow Six Siege now that I saw for Valkyrie. Imagine if you spent $40 on something and, you know, down the road, if they ever wanted to remove it, they clearly can, you would lose access to your $40 purchase right there and then, which again is insane for microtransaction, but that's the world we live in. Games that are sold as a service with a stated expiration date, they would tend to require publishers to have some sort of end-of-life build when support ends. But they would probably fail as there's no basis in consumer law for this. Only justification would be via art and culture preservation laws, which are very weak. Now, a good example of this would be an MMO, right? Like something like Final Fantasy 14 Online. Now, there's no way for you to play that game without an online subscription or a connection to Square Enix's servers. But let's just go down the road and say, all right, well, no basis in consumer law for this. Down the road, if they ever wanted to remove it, they clearly can. You would lose access to your $40 purchase right there and then, which again is insane for microtransaction, but that's the world we live in. Games that are sold as a service with a stated expiration date, they would tend to require publishers to have some sort of end-of-life build when support ends. But they would probably fail as there's no basis in consumer law for this. Only justification would be via art.
Wait, what? Someone in chat said nobody wants this for Pokemon Go. You said, what does any of this have to do with Pokemon Go?
Culture preservation laws, which are very weak. Now, a good example of this would be an MMO, right? Like something like Final Fantasy 14 Online. Now, there's no way for you to play that game without an online subscription or a connection to Square Enix's servers. But let's just go down the road and say, all right, well, what about like down the road, if you know they're done with their game, can we possibly have a build of it, you know, without connecting to your servers? And maybe Square Enix could provide that. They certainly don't need to. And sometimes you get lucky with popular MMOs like FF14, where like the original version of it, there are private servers that you can access, and you can play to have some preserved build of the game that's there. But I'm going to touch upon this a little bit going forward because it has a lot to pertain to how Pirate Software has kind of like talked about the situation. So like in Ross's video, one thing that he points out really well, actually, that I think really nips the point here is that when it comes to Blizzard's own terms of service, right, where Blizzard reserves the right to terminate the agreement at any time for any reason or for no reason, with or even without notice to you. So for instance, if you buy a game from them, they can just remove access right there. And the thing is, the whole point is not to argue about this, it's to make sure that this whole clause doesn't exist. Because you can understand how this is entirely hostile to the actual person, right? Like imagine buying Diablo 4 and not...
Okay. One more side quest.
I have no doubt most of you have noticed over the last 10 or 11 months I've been a lot happier, glowing, really radiant. You can tell probably just from my voice alone and this striking smile. So what is the secret to this newfound happiness of mine, the one trick doctors don't want you to know? I haven't been online as much. I've been going outside far more frequently, spending time in the real world. And as such, I'm sure many of you have noticed over the last 10 or 11 months, internet drama hasn't been a huge focal point of the channel because I haven't seen a whole bunch of it. I haven't kept up with the vast majority of it. And of course, occasionally I've still dipped my tootsies in some of it, like if there's something particularly wacky going on, and I still cover like news and crazy going on with aliens and all of that kind of thing, or if there's like a really cringe, you know, prankster that got arrested or something. Nope. All over it. But it has been online support, and Pirate Software did play a big role in that because of 2 videos he made as well as a stream. All over it. And that's not even doing it justice. He was full-blown tooting on this. He was on it with some fart on top. And a lot of what he was saying about stop killing games wasn't accurate. It was a misrepresentation of the initiative. And the guy behind it, the guy spearheading it, Ross, finally set the record straight on a lot of the misconceptions that Pirate Software helped to put out there and kind of exacerbate these thought processes that just weren't accurate for what the initiative was actually aiming to do. He finally set the record straight, and I, of course, wanted to talk about it as someone who does actually care about it. Now, as I said, I've been a little more off the grid and farm, so I've been, living off the Lord's land recently, and I've missed a lot of the internet happenings. So, Pirate Software's previous anime arcs of drama, like with World of Warcraft, and the one after that, 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 I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to. I only got little tiddlywinks, little morsels of lore about it in a few clips, so I never really even understood what was going on there. So, Pirate Software's response to everything that happened yesterday really caught me by surprise. That was a subversion of my expectations, bigger than Game of Thrones Season 8.
Yeah, Hutcher, I did. I think it's really hilarious to me that that entire community is so butt mad at me for putting out a video 10 months ago about their stuff and it not being refuted, and now it's my fault that everything is going wrong for them.
I cannot believe his ego. His ego is so out of control. I feel like he's only a week or two exclusively referring to himself in third person, like Stone Cold Steve Austin. And that's the truth because Pirate Software said so. Some shit like that. It's crazy how he's responded. The smugness is nails on a chalkboard. It just makes you feel icky listening to it. And he goes on that same...
Allowing self-hosting isn't that hard unless the code base is messy. It takes time and money, but it's doable and wouldn't kill profitability or stop online games from being made. Devs even use local servers during testing. Written by, signed, game dev. Thank you, Ethan. True.
Talking point multiple times in the clip about how, like, oh, I guess I'm fully to blame. I guess because I made those videos 10 months ago, it's my fault entirely that this whole thing crashed and burned. Yep, oh boy, time to play a sad song in the world's smallest violin for the Stop Killing Games movement, all because Big Bad Pirate Software took it all down by himself. Like, it's crazy. No one's saying that. Like, there's no one out there that is saying it's entirely Pirate Software's fault that Stop Killing Games hasn't been more successful in its endeavors. But there's irrefutable evidence that you had a detrimental effect, a majorly damaging effect on Stop Killing Games because of your misinformation that you spread about it in 2 videos and across all your streams, and not once have you bothered to correct that record. And he has said that it hasn't been refuted in 10 months. That is fish paste. That is turbo horseradish. Go to your own comment section on your videos to see see everyone refuting you, as well as the innumerable other gamers and voices out there that have taken down those talking points and debunked a lot of them and proven that you just didn't understand it. And that is the big problem. No one hates Pirate Software because he doesn't agree with Stop Killing Games. The reason so many people are angry at him, myself included here, you can disagree with the movement all you want. If you don't like the initiative, you make your own choices there. But the reason so many people, myself included, do not like how Pirate Software is handling all this is he is outright refusing to just admit any level of fault, that he was wrong about anything. From these clips, as well as his tweets that he's made. It's actually his tweets that really sent me off the rails here, off my board. Let's start with this little nugget here that he deleted from last night. So he tweeted directly at Ross, the guy behind Stop Killing Games, talking about how he made those videos 10 months ago, and since then, his community has been nothing but hateful, a scourge, a tyranid threat that he must destroy. Your community is rabid, shit to deal with for anyone on the other side of the argument. Why do you think I haven't talked about this shit 10 months? Why do you think we auto-mute anyone bringing it up in chat? Because it's been rage bait and flinging the entire time. And just goes on about like how he is the victim of Ross's toxic, terrible community, which is hilariously hypocritical coming from Pirate Software, when in his videos and his streams, he makes it very clear and is very rude about how much he dislikes not only Ross, but the movement. And it's not like he's being very professional and polite about it, buttoned up. Listen to it.
So this was my first encounter of him.
Okay, this is actually really dumb. It's used car salesman garbage. This shit. It's shit. Not only do I not want to back this, I'm going to actively tell people not to. That is awful. That is horrible goddamn direction. That's awful, dude. No, eat my entire ass. The level of stupid that I just had to receive was like sitting on Twitter for 12 hours. This sucks. That's a really stupid ass move. That's an incredibly stupid ass move. I think this is ass. This is complete garbage. All of this can eat that. I dropped the mask entirely. I have no qualms about that. They can eat my entire ass. The whole thing. That sounds stupid as shit.
Yeah, I'm sure it's Ross and his community that are actually the assholes here. Brother, come on, you can't possibly be calling the wambulance with a side of french fries here about people being mean to you when you are literally the one that started the flinging and name-calling. And by the way, Ross never even addressed this for 10 months because he didn't want to dilute the initiative into just having it be boiled down to drama between creators, which I think was actually very big of him. The only reason he's talking about it now is because it's at the end of its life, and so many people still don't understand it because of someone like Pirate Software misrepresenting it. So he's finally setting the record straight there. Anyway, he did delete that tweet, but just a little while ago, he made a new tweet, a very long tweet, as well as a series of tweets under it in regards to this whole thing. And in all these words, all this mumbo-jumbo, not once does he say he was wrong about anything. In fact, he just continues to double down, even proudly stating he is doubling down. Wow, how incredibly noble, doubling down on things you are provably, blatantly wrong about. We don't need to hit the Jumbotron for the replay on yesterday's video going over so many of the things that he was incorrect about in regards to the initiative, but the point is, that is an issue.
Okay, that's our side quests. Does he talk about Thor at all in this video then, or is this just him summarizing all of the efforts of the Stop Killing Games stuff? Do we even need to watch this? Oh, he does.
History, even if it's for the better. And third, if they back this, then a million people might mob them to back something else, and then there's no end to it. So I actually can understand some people wanting to sit this out. I mean, yeah, it really sucks that we can't get enough attention on this badly needed change in the games industry, but I'm not shocked either. Honestly, I'm already punching way, way above my weight class on this.
The Dr. K video with Pirate Software really mind-fucked me because I knew something was off about Thor, but because he came across as a helpful game dev, the unsurmountable ego felt somewhat justifiable because the guy was helping you out in some way. Yeah.
My main promotion video for it got a little under 250,000 views, and about 15% of my audience is from EU countries who are eligible to sign. So that means I shouldn't have expected much more than 30 to 40,000 signatures from my audience, and we're over 10 times that. It's almost like a lot of people out there don't like having their games destroyed. Anyway, most of the criticism I've seen for how I've run this campaign kind of comes down to be more popular. Yeah, sure, maybe everybody else knows how to do that. I don't. I kind of view that critique as similar to don't be poor financial advice.
Well, Pirate Software is posting DMs with Charlie. I covered a topic I'm passionate about that you refused to listen to at all. 2 hours we spent in circles with me explaining my perspective about your behavior, just to be met with a condescending attitude about me being wrong, you misrepresented anything. Then your statement mentions our talk with not a single peep about what my conversation with you was actually meant to focus on, which was your inability to recognize how you misled people about the initiative. You make it seem like I'm just trying to convert you to Stop Killing Games or something, no matter how many times I tell you it's fine not to support it, but what's not fine is your response to the very valid criticism of your misrepresentation. You feel I misinformed people, and I feel I didn't. Your way or the highway goes both ways. Ho-ho. Posting a video response instead of continuing the talk with me is absolutely high school behavior. Was hoping to have an actual conversation with you, but both of us are stubborn and neither of us understand one another clearly. Now that you've sent your fan base after me with that, I'm done chatting though. Ooh.
And that's from people who support the campaign. For all the support and fair coverage we've received, there's been some opposition too. Though I want to say 80, maybe even 90% of people who are against the initiative are against.
Look at the top, the DMs are cut off. Look at the top of what? The scroll bar. What, there's more if you scroll up? I can't scroll up because this is just a picture. So it's hard for me to scroll up on just the picture because I just have a picture. So I don't know what you want me to do with that, but they should make it so you can scroll up on things that there are pictures of. That would be an easy thing to add to pictures. He's saying that Thor only posted a part of the DMs. Gotcha.
Against it because they think it's doing something it's not. For example, the number one criticism about the initiative that we've never been able to shake is that it's unworkable because you can't expect publishers to support games forever. Yeah, we know. That's why we've never asked for that. I must have said this 100 times now. It was written on the website from day one, but this keeps coming up over and over again. See, that's the thing. As soon as you say 3 words on requiring end-of-life plans, gamers especially will jump to some conclusion, and I never know where they're going to land. Ironically, non-gamers tend to be much better at understanding the initiative because they're not coming with a whole bag full of assumptions. A couple other criticisms are how this would violate copyright law by forcing publishers to give up their intellectual property. No, it wouldn't. Some of you may want to pause this part. Or how this won't work because of end-user license agreements. That's also not a problem. Or how this isn't possible because publishers already have agreements with other companies and don't have the rights to distribute that code. We're aware of that. Yes, the initiative is still possible. Those are the ones I've seen most organically. Beyond that, there's a clear patient zero where others come from. Okay, I really don't want to do this next part, but it's become a liability for the campaign for me not to. Our biggest critic by far is YouTuber and streamer PirateSoftware, who goes by Thor. If your only exposure to Stop Killing Games has been this video, then you've been misinformed. This video is by someone who does not understand the campaign, has been trying to stop it, and has been making up what it is about. I am not saying that lightly. I will prove it in a minute. Now you might be thinking, okay, so some YouTuber got something wrong on the internet. So what? See, that was my thinking too. The problem is how incredibly influential this YouTuber has been. Remember that list of coverage on the campaign? Well, best I can tell, Thor's coverage has been bigger than literally anyone else on those lists, except Asmongold. And the only video Asmongold had on this bigger than Thor's was about Thor's video. So for all practical purposes, Thor here has been the #1 voice on the campaign, and he's been lying about what it is. That's a bit loaded though. In this case, I'm using the second definition of lie. I have no evidence it's the first. This video came out right as we were building momentum, then except for one boost in Germany, the signatures started drying up like clockwork. This put me in kind of a no-win scenario too, because if I ignored it, then a lot of people are going to get misinformed about the campaign. And if I did a response video, which is not something I wanted to do anyway, then it might look like drama farming, which could understandably turn off a lot of people from the campaign, because it's not about that at all. So I quickly made this video trying to clear up all misconceptions and concerns about the initiative with timestamps for everyone's questions, hoping the truth would eventually come out.
Yikes.
I can see now that was a mistake. I should have just embraced the drama. To this day, I'm still getting frequent comments and emails about the same falsehoods about the campaign that originated in this video.
Okay.
Well, now I have nothing to lose. If we don't get the signatures, then none of this matters anyway. So if this campaign is failing because of me not talking about this, then I'll at least correct history here on the way down. I'll get this over with and go over what I think are the biggest points of PirateSoftware's videos. I'm not going to go over everything because collectively Thor's made hours of video on both me and the movement. I'd be here forever. Believe me, I could address smaller things too, and kind of already have. All right, let's start. Okay, point number 1. Thor does not understand what Stop Killing Games is. Here it is in his words.
So if those don't understand, the Stop Killing Games initiatives is basically, we don't want single-player games to have DRM that the developers can turn off and thus render the single-player games inactive anymore. This is what they want to change. They need to be specific that they're talking about single-player games that do not need a server to support them. And as much as they want it to be about specifically games, where it is a single-player game that has always online functionality, it would impact every live service game that exists, instead of just targeting single-player, always online games.
No, that's not what it is. Stop Killing Games includes single-player games, but nothing about it is specific to them. He completely made that up, and I have no idea where he got that impression. This is what I mean. It's harder for gamers to understand this because they come with so many assumptions. It's like that saying about doctors being the worst patients. So let's clear this up. It's the first line on the website. Stop Killing Games as a consumer movement started to challenge the legality of publishers destroying video games they have sold to customers. But the movement includes all this stuff from earlier, and he was mostly talking about the initiative. Well, the short version is the initiative is about requiring publishers to have end-of-life plans for games they've sold to customers in the future. So when they shut them down, customers can continue running them without their support. The long version depends on what kind of transaction is being made. As you can see, it's not easy to explain in a soundbite. But if you notice, we don't make a distinction between single-player and multiplayer games. That's because the law doesn't either. So why make this even harder? Both the movement and the law are making distinctions on how games are sold. Also, that part he said about it affecting all live service games? Yes and no. It would affect most live service games in the future, but the initiative is not retroactive. So that's one thing Thor doesn't understand, but he also seems to think this is about converting multiplayer games to single player. Once again, he made that up, and I have no idea why he thought that.
How many games have you wanted to play that you no longer can? This is so barely an issue and requires so much work from devs. Why would we listen to Ross, who has never seen code in his life? So I actually think the strongest criticism is actually that. The reality is, not to be mean to you guys, or I don't know if you guys care about this, like there's probably not that many old games that people actually super want to play. This would be a thing that you would be doing hardcore for like video game hobbyists or like hardcore video game. But even like saying hardcore video game enjoyers, it wouldn't really, it would be certain niches of it because most people want to play like the newer games that everybody's playing and all that shit. So this would be kind of a niche-ish thing. That's probably the best response to it. It's just not worth it. I don't believe that this would require so much more work from devs, so I think that's bullshit. Would probably require a little bit more work though, but
Transitioning an entire multiplayer server-side game into a single-player video game, which means rebalancing the entire experience around single-player, rebuilding everything in the entire game. How are you going to do that with Final Fantasy XIV? You're just going to make all the raids soloable? Imagine the day that World of Warcraft shuts down, and suddenly you have to make it a single-player game for every individual that ever bought the game. That's what they're asking for.
No.
Because they
Jesus, what?
would have to sunset live service games as a single-player experience. The idea that suddenly you need to make every single live service game playable single-player offline? No, dude.
Correct. No. This one is particularly baffling to me because I've heard most counter-arguments before, but until Thor, I've never heard this one, that we want the industry to convert all multiplayer games into single-player ones. I keep saying it. You never know where gamers are going to take this.
Nowhere in there does it say that it's directly targeting always online single-player games.
Oh, he's so close. He's so close to getting it.
It is vague, and because of that, it
He never has that light bulb moment. Well, he is correct in that statement. It's almost as if that's not what the initiative is asking for. But those were his streams with a smaller audience. What does he say in his big YouTube video with over 1 million views that he had time to research?
If we're trying to kill off the practice of developers putting together a live service game, pitching it as a single-player experience, and then taking away support in the future.
Now he's changed it again and is making up how it's about single-player games are advertised. What is he doing?
It needs to be specific about the business practice it's trying to defeat, which is specifically companies that are doing this under the guise of it being a single-player game, but adding online-only functionality that is not necessary and doesn't add any gameplay elements. That's the problem.
No, that's not it at all.
And there are some people who say, well, just make it all single player.
Like
Well,
you?
explain that doesn't make any sense in the first place. If you're making it all single player, you have to carve off all of that, and it's developer time and money. These are two different ideologies, and that's okay to have two different ideologies. I just won't agree with it.
But those aren't the ideologies. Nothing in the initiative is asking to convert games to single player.
Nowhere in there does it say that it's directly targeting always online single player games.
Yeah, so why does he keep bringing it up? This is a total red herring.
If we don't like the idea of live service games as a whole, I get it. Don't play live service games then. Don't agree to those terms.
No, he's getting a new thing wrong now. We're not against them existing. We're against them being destroyed with no recourse for the customer. Just use logic. If we didn't like them in the first place, why would we care if they're being destroyed? He says he gets it, but he doesn't.
Let's talk about the actual bad business practices. In the case that a studio is making a live service game and they sell it to you as a product, they say that you are purchasing the game or you are buying the game, when in reality you're actually purchasing or buying a license to that game. I think that we should be fighting about that. The initiative is not trying to call that out specifically. It's trying to say that all games need to stay in a functional, playable state,
Yes!
which is not calling out the language that is being used to manipulate the player. Call that out specifically.
Okay, I don't know if he's doing this intentionally. I'll be charitable and assume he's not. But this is some serious obfuscation. He's complaining that the initiative isn't focused on another topic he made up. I mean, what is that logic? Hey, the initiative doesn't address how Capcom changed the look of Dante in the Devil May Cry reboot either. That may as well be what he's saying there. I am not aware of a game on the planet with a license agreement that says you are not buying a license. Our problem is not with licenses failing to inform people. Blizzard says they can take away your purchase for no reason. That sounds pretty clear to me. Our problem is those terms are so hostile to consumers and the medium that they should be taken off the table entirely. This needs regulation. Forget video games. If you look at basic commerce for hundreds of years, when you paid money, you either got to keep what you paid for, or if it was a service, you were told when your access ends. The vast majority of online-only games do neither of those. The games industry is trying to upend basic commerce. I think you have to go back to feudalism before neither of those things are true. Why even have consumer laws if you have no rights?
If you try to tell me that every
This is kind of true. I feel like this came up for some game recently, but I can't remember. Like the launch was so disastrous, they said they were going to shut down the servers in like 2 months. Now, in practice, this probably wouldn't happen because you have millions of players on a game. You're probably not going to shut down the service because you're making money doing it. But like in practice, but in theory, like a company could theoretically, like Blizzard could release a new game, like Diablo 5, sell 10 million copies, and then instantaneously shut down the servers, and you basically have a bricked game that you just paid money for. And according to the end user license agreement, you kind of have accepted that. That's a little bit weird, right? Oh, somebody said it was Concord, but they gave refunds to everybody.
every studio needs to run their live service game indefinitely or not want to run one at all, then no one's going to run them.
Oh no! He wheeled out that line about publishers having to support the game forever. He was literally watching the video earlier where it says it won't do that in big letters. That wasn't enough. We just can't stop gamers from going there, even when we spell it out. I admit, guys, this part hurts. To see the biggest voice on this issue get it wrong again and again and again, then put that same wrong information on blast to a far bigger audience that we can reach. It hurts. He doesn't get it. He doesn't understand what we're asking for. Now, to be fair, it sounded like he was getting a little closer in this video. Yeah, despite being called 2, it's at least the 4th video he did on this.
You want that to stay in a functional playable state. That means the devs have to release either server binaries or somehow carve off the game to be a single player experience now.
That's better, but he's still talking about converting the single player right to the end. He never completely got it. So Pirate Software did not understand the initiative. Maybe still doesn't. That means the majority of his critique is about things it would not do, like kill all MMOs.
If that passes, enjoy never playing an MMO again for the rest of your life and taking away from every other person that plays MMOs.
It really wouldn't. And I've explained why in that video, but the short version is companies would have to stop liking money for that to happen. Lots of money. But his number one criticism is that he thinks the initiative is vague.
Incredibly vague, too vague, very vague and vague. It's vague, that is vague, too vague, vaguely vague, incredibly vague, vaguely worded, vague, this is vague.
This goes on. Well, from Thor's perspective, his logic is pretty sound for this part. But the thing about logic is it's only as good as your assumed truths. And he said multiple times now that he thinks the initiative is only about single-player games. So since he's expecting the thing he made up, but that's not what the initiative is asking for, he thinks it's vague. Because for him, it is.
Nowhere in there does it say that it's directly targeting always online single-player games. It is vague.
Yeah, in fact, if we look at that long definition again, let's add a subsection just for Thor. Single-player games with an online DRM check. Those would already fall under this broader category. So Thor is expecting this. Again, I don't know why, but instead he's seeing an initiative that covers all of this.
Okay, I'm bored. Chud logic.
You can personally dislike this campaign, and Pirate Software was a totally disgusting wretch in how he dealt with this from day one, okay? Both those things can be true, don't worry. Two things can simultaneously be correct, okay? There's nothing to defend Pirate Software on this. He said multiple things that were just factually wrong about what the initiative was supposed to be, right? And on top of that as well, he totally refused to talk to the guy. He completely smeared the guy, and then totally refused to have a conversation.
Based.
Utterly cowardly, spineless wretch behavior from this guy, from Pirate Software. It's indefensible, totally indefensible behavior on Pirate Software's part.
Thinking, okay, so
Wow. Sounds like a hater. We've got a Pirate Software hater, everyone.